Hey guys, how's it going? This is Tom Burkhart from Car Revs Daily with the 2018 Hyundai Sonata Limited 2.0T. This is the most loaded version of the revised 2018 Sonata, which has pricing for about $22,000. This 245 horsepower turbo model with all the equipment as standard comes in at 32. All right. Thank you very much for watching. First off, we're developing a little fan base here. It's kind of gratifying. So 2018 Sonata 2.0T, going out for a quick drive review on the handling loop. Let's focus on a couple different things on this review. Well, basically in two different buckets, the good and the bad. There are good and bad things about this revised 2018 Sonata. So let's dive in and find out. So first things first, what is so great about this revised 2018 Sonata? Well, it looks awesome, as you can tell. It looks really premium and super cool in the sport trim, especially with black chrome accents for everything that's chrome in some of the other models, like the standard limited, not the limited 2.0T. And it's generally just sort of like intensified. The looks share a lot with the new Genesis G80 Sport, which is fantastic because it shows that Hyundai and Genesis are not, it doesn't take years of lag time for the hottest style trends to really appear on the cars. And that's a perfect case in point here. We've got the nice sort of dark waterfall effect for the sport mesh in front, and that is very nice versus the chrome nose on the standard limited. So any G80 Sport style in a traditional mainstream mid-size sedan is pretty awesome, especially when they arrive at basically the same time on the marketplace. So this new Sonata with its new nose really looks very fresh and premium and pretty sporty. It's a nice little look for the car, and then you also have a brand new tail out back. So they've relocated the license plate bracket to down in the lower bumper, which creates sort of a nice horizontal strike face for the trunk itself, and a really nice room for new LED taillights in this 2018 Sonata. So it definitely looks good, and I'm very impressed with its appearance and the revisions that they were able to make on what is basically a mid-cycle facelift. So it's really nice that it looks so good, and there's also big upgrades inside. So like the standards for a facelift at Hyundai are pretty deep. I mean, you have very similar cabin than before, but new sort of piano style keys for the touch points, as well as wireless charging now, and a new sort of shroud for the navigation touchscreen. So it all is pretty nice, and is a very effective refresh for this vehicle that came out in 2015 and didn't really receive rave reviews. This generation of Sonata really majored in adding a ton of backseat room that the previous car didn't have. So as a result, it has a little bit of a more practical roofline than some people were expecting from the super swoopy Sonata from like 09 to 2014. But really, the looks have matured well and are now sort of clean and sophisticated and fairly, even if they are fairly conservative in 2017 and 2018. So these looks are definitely a big advantage for the refreshed Sonata. And another big upgrade is this the drivetrain. So it's a lot quicker than before, thanks to a new 8-speed automatic transmission. So still same turbo motor, 2.4 L, making 245 horsepower and 260 foot-pounds of torque. But with this new 8-speed automatic, the sprint time should go from about 7.2 to the low to mid-6s. But as you can sort of see on this launch, like there are some issues. So let's talk more about what's good in the car. So the Sonata Limited 2.0T basically takes that 27K sport look and chassis with the bigger brakes, 18-inch alloys with wider rubber, and then of course like the special steering that the Sonata Turbos get, which is the rack-mounted power steering system instead of just the traditional electronic power steering. And other upgrades include like an electronic parking brake with auto hold functionality, and really just a super comprehensive set of equipment. That's particularly true on this Limited. So it's about $4 or $5 grand more than the Sonata Sport 2.0T. And for that, you get basically everything is standard. Heated and cooled seats. You got a big moonroof, leather everywhere. This D-cut steering wheel. Let's see, and then all the active safety stuff like active cruise and lane keep assist, as well as blind spot, proximity handles, LED by LED low and high beams with cornering functionality. I mean, it really is just like is super loaded. And in that regard, this Sonata Limited 2.0T has almost all the goodies that you could get in the new Genesis G80 Sport from like $55,000. And that includes like a really big back seat. So Sonata is big in the back seat. It's got a huge level of room back there and no transmission tunnel, so it's just like all flat floor and leg room, knee room, hip room, and headroom galore. So those are all really good things. But there are places where I'm starting to think that the Sonata Limited 2.0T needs a little bit more work to compete with some of the most current mid-size sedans in the marketplace. So those, of course, are going to be Camry and Accord, and they are both brand new for 2018 with really sort of heavy redesigns that share very little with the cars that came before. So this Sonata needs to be really good, not just look really good, but needs to drive really well in order to get to the top of my list and to beat cars like the exceptional Mazda 6 and Subaru Legacy, which are great. They're awesome. You should definitely, more people should buy them. I don't know if that's you, but they definitely should. But so what are the downsides of this new 2018 Sonata? So for one thing, like the Sport Drive, it's got drive modes like Comfort, Eco, Smart, and Sport. And for once in my life, I'm actually not in Sport mode. I'm just in Smart, which is like an adaptive setting. I'll go into Sport now. Sport, for some reason, is really annoying to me this week. It's like, it's really jumpy off the line, and it doesn't seem to have very effective downshifts as you approach corners, and is generally and firms up the steering, but not in really a meaningful way that is like would make it a must drive. So that's an issue. Second issue is like this turbo, it still doesn't feel very strong. I mean, it's definitely got a lot more power than the standard engine, the naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and is a lot quicker. It's almost like a full 2 seconds quicker, but it really is, you know how some turbos really sort of punch above their weight and how enthusiastic they feel on the road. I'm thinking of like the Volkswagen 1.8T, for example. I mean, that thing is 170 horsepower, and it's like, but it feels much speedier than those numbers would suggest. Whereas with 245 horsepower here, it definitely doesn't feel, you know, immensely rapid or enthusiastic. So that's kind of an issue. And then the other thing is that this 8-speed automatic, while it is really good for certain purposes, like it really is great for getting you out of corners rapidly and for passing power, you know, for kickdowns where it can do just cover a lot more gear ratio spread than before. So that is really good, and it also improves the fuel economy up to 32 on the highway. And we've got paddle shifters, so it's, you know, they're trying. They're really trying genuinely. Oh shit. So they're trying genuinely, but this transmission has issues. It's just got issues. It doesn't really, I don't know if regular, normal, like everyday drivers would experience this as much as I am, but I definitely think that I don't like this transmission. For example, like for a brake torque launch, it doesn't really do it. Like, there's like a, and then the second upshift is really messed up. And there are other times in aggressive driving in the city where you sense that, or where you're like, when you're coming on and off the throttle really sharply, there's a lot of like heave back and forth, and it's just is not really a smooth operator. This 8-speed automatic is the first Hyundai 8-speed applied to a front-wheel drive vehicle, and you can kind of tell, like, it really, this transmission needs work. And if it were a better transmission, I think this car would be able to do like maybe a 6.0 second sprint to 60 miles an hour. It's like it really has that much lag right off the line, and that's an issue. Other things that like we just experienced, like basically the Limited 2.0T is basically like a Sport Limited 2.0T, if that makes sense. The regular Limited has a much softer suspension than these turbo cars. So this turbo has a pretty firm suspension, but I don't feel like it gives you the, firm suspension is really good for road holding and being able to keep the car planted around corners without much body roll. But this suspension, it rides firmly, but the car still has a lot of body roll, and it still has like not great levels of control, even with this extremely modest amount of power. It has a hard time putting that power down, like coming out of a stop sign, for example. If you floor the gas, I mean, you're going to be spinning wheels and squealing pretty aggressively, which like doesn't feel necessary for a car that has just 245 horsepower, and it's not really like that enthusiastic type of wheel spin either. So a little, I mean, it definitely makes the most of this engine's power, more so than the previous 6-speed automatic transmission. But is it like as good as like the 8 speeds from many other manufacturers? No, it just is not. And so back to the handling piece, is that even though this car rides pretty firmly, like it doesn't handle very well. I mean, I feel bad saying that, but it just doesn't. It has a lot of understeer. It's never really very engaging in terms of like having the rear end feel like it's involved in some of the handling dynamics. It just sort of seems a little bit like an imposter level of sportiness, which is disappointing because, Hyundai, obviously I'm a big Hyundai and Genesis fan, and I know they can make great cars. I mean, the other week, the Elantra GT, so sublime to drive, and a car that is a real golf killer. Whereas with this new Sonata, I don't know if this is a Camry or an Accord killer. It definitely is better than cars like Fusion or Malibu in terms of how premium it looks outside and the level of equipment you get in here for just like $33,000. But in general, it is not at the top of my list for midsize sedans. So that's disappointing. I know Hyundai can do better than they have. Hopefully no more understeer incidents. So there are a lot of good things with this car, but it is just a little bit too underwhelming for me to absolutely love it. I know my reviews here on video especially are like sort of like Jimmy Fallon, like kind of like love everything, but there are times when there are cars that just really don't do it for you, and unfortunately this 2018 Sonata Limited 2.0T is one of those times. We'll see you guys next week. This is Tom Burker from Car Reviews Daily.